Good? Okay. Hello, everybody. You want to come in and take a seat? And we'll get started. As soon as Vicki gets done collecting money. Because that's the important thing. Don't know if anybody knows this, but September 19th is Talk Like a Pirate Day. Has anybody ever heard of that? I used to work for Enterprise, and the IT department, we had a blast with this every year that we changed our names and everything else. I noticed it was Talk Like a Pirate Day. So the whole theme this month is going to be pirate kind of talk. Yeah. And if you have any show and tell, bring it over. Show and tell tables over here this month. We still can't move the stage, so we have to work around that. And when we got here tonight, they didn't know we were supposed to be here tonight. They thought we were next week. Maintenance guy forgot. He thought it was next week. Announcement. Remember, we're recording. If you have any questions or anything else, please use the microphone in the middle. We are looking for 2 volunteers to fill some couple spots. First one is a membership coordinator. David Schindler is the guy that you see when you come in the front door. We need somebody to replace him because he wants to step down. And the next is Bill Schucott. He hands too many jobs around here. He's vice president. He does the class coordinator. He does the meetings here, sets everything up here, did the picnic. So we're looking for somebody to take the class coordinator from Bill that will do all of the shorty classes, the working classes throughout the year. Bill's still going to be doing the big programs, but we're looking for somebody that can, vice versa, right. Do the big programs too? Okay. You'll do the classes? Okay. Free stuff in the back of the room. Please take whatever you want. Books, magazines, metal rack. We have some sanding discs back there that look like they're pretty good. It's in a Rockler bag back there. We don't take all of the wood pieces. They're going to be donated to the toys. I'm cleaning out one of my shops, and this is just extra stuff that I had that I need to get rid of. If you don't take it, it goes to Goodwill. Up here on the front table, we have an auction going on the circular saw. Hey, looks like I got everything. Good. Let's go to the next slide. New members. I know we have some new members here tonight. Want to come up to the microphone, tell us who you are and what you're interested in and how you do, what kind of woodworking you would like to do or do. Do. Oh, that's great, isn't it? But you can, that's fine.
My name is Craig Altman, and I'm a beginner. Worked a little bit with the lathe, and just really looking forward to finding out a little bit more about being exposed to different types of woodworking and kind of going from there.
All right. Welcome.
Thanks.
Hey everybody, my name's Jason Grozowski, and I own a resale business. So I'm always working on furniture, and I always need some skills. So I'm here for that, and I'm a guitar nut.
All right.
So I got the bug when I was like 12, and you just can't put them down. So
me too.
You know, it's hard.
I got a room full.
Yeah, it's easy to do.
Yeah.
So all right, nice to meet you all. See you around.
Welcome.
Okay, I'm Rob Stout. I'm a a friend of Craig Noel's, and he turned me on to this organization, and I'm going to be building a 12-foot table, a dining room table. I built a buffet, and I've had some experience with drying wood and getting it milled and things like that. So I'm looking to really learn more about joinery and the ins and outs of furniture making. So,
All right. Welcome.
hey.
Anybody else?
I stood up not intending to do this. My wife is here tonight. She's very slightly interested in woodworking, but she's more interested in our speaker, Jay. They are both pediatricians, and when she trained down at Glennon, he was early in his career, and they crossed paths several times. So she's, as you know, here to support you tonight.
All right. Welcome. All right, next. Bing. Upcoming events. Next month, we are going to have a discussion with a bunch of guys from the group. Going to talk about setting up a small shop. What you need to do, the things you don't need to do, things you shouldn't do, things you should watch out for. And then we have November, we have Brad Bernhardt talking about shellac finishing. Why am I cutting out? Good? Okay. Next. Thank you. Upcoming classes, September 25th. Dave Windows is going to do a small box. October 1st, I'm going to be doing a beginning turning class. 29th, Mike Sistick and Bill Schucott is going to do a class on sharpening. And then on November 5th, Bill is going to do a class on the lead dovetail jig. And we have a big one at the shop. Big. Sure.
Initiating a class for beginners, true novices, to get them used to using the equipment in our shop. And that isn't scheduled yet, but it's probably going to be in early December. So anybody who watches the video of this, take note of it, that we're going to have a class for people that are really just beginning. We've been offering a class in fundamentals, and we have some people in there that are pretty novices, and we're going to try and get a special class just for the people who are really new to woodworking.
All right. And if you want to sign up for any of the classes, you can go out and go on our web page, and in the calendar, you'll find the classes there. You can go through and sign up from there. Speaking about the web page, is if you haven't done this and you're new and you can do this, is go out there and update your profile. You know, a lot of us have done this when it first came out, and our experience has changed, our interest in stuff has changed. So if you could go out there and update your profile so we can get a little bit better information. We have 3 outreach programs we're working on right now. Rich Weitzman, back over here in the corner, does the toys. He's the chairman for the toy drive. Wayne Humphreys is the chairman for the Christmas toy program. They meet every other Friday at the shop from noon to 5, right? Noon to 4, okay. And then Tom Turney, these tables up here are ones that we're making. And Tom does have some more wood in his truck if anybody needs any wood. And Vicki will say a few words.
That's one of the places that I volunteer. And I was talking to the warehouse dude, and we have a couple of opportunities. One is we want to not do any more coffee tables, because often the living quarters that these individuals or families are moving into are on the smaller side. Really aren't fitting. But the side tables and those pull-up tables that you might have seen last month are really great. And also, they are asking, in lieu of the coffee tables, roughly a 2-foot by 3-foot dining table or eating table, you know, just where you can pull a couple of chairs up to. Often they're single people in these apartments, and they just need something small. So that's the new direction we want to focus everyone on, that is so graciously building tables. And then secondly, they sometimes they go and pick up furniture from people that are donating. And sometimes they come across something that may be a little damaged, so some wood is cracked, or it's repairable. And they don't have really the skill sets to repair that. So they've asked if we might be interested in helping them out, making some of those repairs. So Tom and I have talked, and we're hoping we can do that. We're trying to figure out the logistics of how that would work, because obviously we don't really have room at the shop. There'll be an option of maybe going to their place in Brentwood to pick up, or we can figure something out. So if you are interested in maybe signing up to do some of those kinds of repairs so that then it can be used by Home Sweet Home, just let Tom or me know, and we'll get your name and we'll figure out exactly how we're going to do it. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. And next is the raffle. Tonight we have $50 Woodcraft, $20 Rockler, and a DVD from Alex Snodgrass on the art of bandsaw boxes. So we have 3 things for a raffle tonight. And the first number is?
And the winning number is, last 4 digits, 6791. That's 6791. Look at that. We have
All
you
right.
have them?
Yep, I got
What would
them.
you like?
So we got a $50, a $20, and a DVD. You want the 20?
No, you may want that DVD. Okay, now you draw, please. Don't look. Only one, please. There we go. Okay. Last 4 digits. 6829. Okay.
All right. Which would you like?
Thank you. Don't look. Okay. And our last one is, last 4 digits, 6796. 96. 67.
All right.
Cameraman. Here.
Cameraman.
Thanks, Todd.
Oh, and tell. Looks like we only have one. Well, he's up here. These are the sanding blocks that I was talking about that's in the back. Pink, not square. Kind of looks like a pencil eraser. Pretty neat. So, okay, come on up. What's that? Right Right there would be fine. Can we get a microphone over here?
Gotcha. Okay, I made this, it's a serving tray. I made it out of brown curly maple and western red, it's not western, it's red cedar. I'm pretty sure this cedar came from Canada because I don't think it comes out of California anymore. And I did a little inlay on the top with some, it's like, it's a dust. You carve it out and then you fill in the grooves with this dust, and you put CA glue in there, and you build it up, and then you sand it all back down, and whatever's left over, it fills the grooves. So I made this for the missus. It's not my original idea. I got the plans actually off of a woodsmith, and if you go on the website, they can give you the plans, and it was an interesting project to build because it was so thin. And I wound up pinning it together with dowels here at the bottom and the side, and then the handles just kind of fit into grooves that I cut, and they all have certain angles that they work off of, and it was an interesting project and it was fun. So that's that. Very good. Very nice job.
Alan Brown here. That table in front of you, that's the one I built right there. If anyone wants to get involved with that service, that's a fun table to build, okay? I built the other over sofa one as well, okay, and I turned that in last month. But it's very easy to build. The wood, you know, is great, and you know, it's good for charity. So, just want to let you guys know.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a nice table. Is that it for show and tell? Well, here comes the guy that we all been waiting for about 3 months now, or 4 months we've been waiting for this. Jay, want to come on up? I'll hand the clicker over to you. Oh, yeah, I'll get you a microphone. Okay. Me? That was me. Yeah. I took. Yeah, I took that one off of the webpage. I mean, the newsletter.
Thank you. All right, so I am Jay Knopfsinger. I hesitate to do this, but I have to start off with an apology. I know that's not appropriate for any talk, but after a lot of consternation and thought from many angles and advice from many woodworkers and non-woodworkers, I decided that it would be not possible for me to actually bring in the finished chest. It's humongous. It's 4 feet wide, 3 feet tall, and 2 feet from front to back. And as you'll see, you saw briefly there, but the feet are called French feet that go out and forward, and they're only about 1 inch wide, that lumber. So you can imagine something that big and that delicate, though, at the bottom. If that thing got dropped a little bit, I can just imagine one of those breaking off, and there are several $1,000s in just wood in this project. So I apologize. but unfortunately I did not bring in the thing. But hopefully the pictures will be enough to kind of give you an idea. There are at least 3 of the guild members have been to my house and have seen it. So any of you that want to do that are welcome to just call me and make an appointment, or make sure that I'm home and come by, and I'd be happy to show you the actual piece. So we're going to go through the actual build. I'm kind of glad that there weren't that many show and tells, because I won't feel as bad about at the length of talking about all the steps in doing this build. Because I have 75 slides, and it'll take about an hour or so, not counting questions. I was going to ask people who had questions to write them down and wait till the end. So if people were tired of listening, wanted to go home at that point, they could do that, and we could still get questions at the end. I think we'll have time now to actually, if you have questions, you can come up to the microphone, and we'll try to deal with them as they may appear then. My wife and I have always loved antiques. We're old, and we like old things for many reasons. We have a house full of antiques. So ultimately, I've kind of gravitated to thinking about trying to work in some of the forms that were done a long time ago, and to make projects that are that are American period furniture design and so on. Probably been doing woodworking for over 50 years in one form or another, but more concentrated in the last about 12 to 15 years, when I partly retired about 13 years ago or so, or went to part-time, I should say. Had a lot more time to do woodworking and to start going to classes at Mark Adams School of Woodworking. And then at two and a half years ago, I completely retired, so I have even more time now. So we're gonna, I did a federal style Pennsylvania spice box, which some of you have seen. That's a federal style, Steve Latta. I did a arts and craft, very large bookcase with Nancy Hiller as the teacher, and she's written a book on arts and craft design. There are just incredible people at Mark Adams. They're just masters, and nationally and internationally known. And finally, I've always wanted to work with a gentleman named Alf Sharp. He comes to Mark Adams, or he has in the past, about every 2 years or so. He is absolutely a master in American period furniture. In fact, he was the winner of the very coveted Cartouche Award in 2008 for the Society of American Period Furniture Making. It's only given to one person every year, and it's kind of considered a lifetime achievement award. Needless to say, he is an expert. So I really wanted to take a class with him. In 2017, I was finally able to do whatever I wanted to in taking classes. I didn't have to work on my master's and do a class in turning or a class in finishing or whatever. I could do whatever I wanted to. So I started doing classes that did have a project. Now, when you do a project class at Mark Adams, you're not going to leave with the project completed, believe me. There's a lot of homework and a lot of extra work when you get done. So in 2017, he was in the catalog for giving a class. The class was going to be on making a hanging corner cupboard. It was beautiful. My wife loved it. That's important. Being married for 55 years, it's kind of important that she enjoy it too. And I loved it. And so I even went to the point of doing the cut list. I had all my walnut prepared, ready to go. It was going to be the last class of the year. Actually, there are several classes at once. But the last classes of the year tend to be the last week of October, the first week of November. About a week and a half before the class was supposed to occur, I got a call from the school saying there just aren't enough pupils to justify having Alf come, so it got canceled at the last minute. So I was not too happy. He only comes every couple years. So 2 years later, he was going to come again. He was on the schedule. It was going to be the first class of the year, which tends to be the last week in March into the first week of April. And it was going to be a footstool. That didn't interest me too much, but at least it was going to have ball and claw feet, which Brad has made how many now? 20, whatever, a whole bunch of them. I hadn't done that, so I thought, well, at least I can learn that technique and so on. So of course I signed up. I didn't know how many years Alf would be coming to the school again. Guess what happened in March of 2019? COVID. Guess what? It got canceled too, so I'm back to square one. 2 years later, which was 2021, just a year ago, I look at the catalog again. Been 2 years, so Alpha's going to come, and this time we're going to make this bow front dresser. This is that was in the catalog, which I assume was something that he made himself. And the only thing I want to point out on this particular example is the fact that there are there's line inlay around each drawer, and there's a corner piece called a fan, and look at the hardware, and the bottom feet are those French feet that come forward and out to the side. The back ones go backwards and out to the side. These are a little bulkier than mine, and I'll come back and talk about that, because if they were this bulky, I might not have was worried as much about it being dropped. So that was going to be the project. So who the heck is George Hepplewhite? Because the name of the class was building this large bow front dresser in the Hepplewhite design. I didn't know anything about the Hepplewhite design or George Hepplewhite, who the heck he was. So look at his time that he was around, 1727 to 1786, so the 18th century. That period of time, in fact, the specific period of time within that period that was attributed to him for the design was 1760 to 1790. Now remember, he died in 1786, so keep that in mind too. Okay, this was within the federal period. The federal period is much larger. It encompassed several other periods within it. And that whole period was called also broadly the neoclassical style. So in the 18th century, in the 1700s, there were three considered masters of woodworking. First was Thomas Chippendale. I think most of you have heard of Thomas Chippendale and the Chippendale form and design and so on. Then came George Hepplewhite, and then came Thomas Sheraton. That was pretty much the whole 18th century, the 1700s. I learned along the way that if you want to get your name remembered for all of time, become considered a master in your design and so on in woodworking, you got to write a book. So most of these masters at some point in their career wrote a book, which is something that could live forever, and that is what they became known after. Okay, so keep that in mind too. Here's the book. This book is considered the monument, his monument, George Hepplewhite's monument. Guess when it was published? 2 years after he died. So he didn't even publish this book. It's probably his widow and some other people that she got together to help her with it and so on. It was called George Hepplewhite, The Cabinet Maker and Upholsterer's Guide. And so it came out in 1788 with 2 revisions after that, the last one being 94, I guess so. And guess what? It's still available. So it's been reproduced and reproduced. So my wife did the searching for me and found it online, probably eBay or something like that. So I got a copy of it, and I'll start that around so you can all look at it. So somebody come up and grab this so you can start. If you notice, there's some loose papers in there, and if you open to that page, at least, you can look through however you want, but look at that page. There happens to be a illustration of pretty much exactly what this model is going to look like. So you can kind of see that it was, you could attribute it to his design work. So I think you can say, in fact, experts have said they don't think they have ever found not only not a piece of furniture, but not even a piece of wood that George Hepplewhite ever did himself. So he may not have actually been much of a woodworker, but more of a designer. Okay, but he still became known for his designs. So some of the things that are part of his design would include ornamentation, like the inlay and so on. That's one of the things he was famous for. Another was daintiness, and that come back to, remember the picture of the very kind of wide feet on the one that he did? Well, he ultimately decided that didn't really fit the Hepplewhite design, which is why he had us ultimately make ones that are much more dainty and so on. But those are at least two of the characteristics. So now you know as much about George Hepplewhite as I do, so which isn't very much. So if you go to a class at Mark Adams that you're going to do a project, the person who's teaching is going to give you a cut list. Well, there are cut lists, and then there are cut lists. Look at that stack. This is a little kind of end on end. Now, I thought the one thing I was looking forward to is I had a pretty good pile of walnut. I thought, well, at least I'm not going to have to buy any lumber. You know, I can surely get what I need out of my pack stack that I had. All of my stack was like 5.4 or 4.4. What you make a lot of furniture out of. You know, you plane it down to 3/4 inch or something like that. Look in that pile. Do you see anything that is anywhere close to 5.4 or 4.4? So I basically had to buy every single piece there. There are just a couple little things in the inside that I was able to use some of my own walnut. I do not know what's happened to the price of lumber since May of 2021. I don't know if it's gone up or down since then, but I guarantee you that before May of 21 and maybe the 3 or 4 years before that, maybe partly related to COVID, I don't know. But boy, I hit having to buy this lumber at a really, really bad time. So incredibly expensive. So that's how we're going to get started. This is the rest of the wood. And so the only thing that isn't walnut in my case was the panel that goes inside a frame that just goes on the back of this piece. And that panel itself is made out is a 1/2-inch Baltic birch plywood. The drawer bottoms, which go from there to there, it's kind of hard to see the other side that they're, you know, it's as big as the drawer bottom, is also Baltic birch plywood that's about 3/8 of an inch instead of a 1/2 an inch. And the rest of the lumber that is for the backs and sides of the drawers themselves is poplar. Okay, so this is a pretty big pile for a cut list, isn't it? Now, the top itself, which is the most visible thing on a dresser, you look at it, you see the top of the dresser. It's preferable. You probably aren't going to find a piece of walnut that's solid walnut that's more than 24 inches wide, that's in good shape. But at least you would like to try to have as few joints as possible. So I found a piece that was probably 13 inches wide, maybe a little over 8 feet long. That'll work. Now it's rough sawn, remember, so I didn't know what it was going to look like after it was planed, but it looked beautiful. It looked like it was going to be pretty wood. I was very disappointed when I actually planed it down and found so much sapwood. The white part is sapwood, and the other beautiful walnut is heartwood then. So that's going to end up being a problem that I have to deal with later on. So I kind of played around with my two pieces and decided if I ended up, because some people like that. Some people like it's a design feature. You leave it in there and so on. So I had these pieces together. You can kind of see a pyramid and some sapwood there, some sapwood there. I don't like that though, so I'm going to ultimately try to get rid of that. And I think it worked out pretty well then. Okay, so when we got to the class and we walked into the classroom and so on, this is a mock-up or a very, very roughly thrown together kind of design that Alf had done, just to show the techniques, kind of get an idea of what this is going to look like and how it's put together and so on. You can't see in this picture, but when it says bow front, these pieces of solid wood are 3 inches thick in the middle, go down to about 1 1/8 inches on the sides. Massive. I mean, just picking up and look, they're bigger and bigger. The bottom one is 8 inches from top to bottom. I mean, just that drawer front is very, 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 very heavy then. Obviously, this is not a finished piece. It's not going to end up being a cabinet of any kind. A lot of sapwood. Again, I have no idea what he did there because there's no way the heartwood's going to end there. So he probably glued a piece on the end just to have enough lumber then. Okay, there are 4 corner pieces, and they're originally square, but they ultimately are cut. A lot of it is cut off as waste to make the feet be able to go forward and to the side, like I talked about. Those are called French feet. And these are already smaller than the big one in that first picture that I showed you that he had done. I think ours are even more dainty and smaller than that. These 2 sides are hooked together with what are called blades. There's a blade, and so on. Except the bottom one is called an apron, which is wider. It's about 2 1/4 inches top to bottom then. They are connected at the ends by a mortise in these corner pieces and a tenon on the blade that fits into that mortise in. You're kind of picturing that? And then the side, those corner pieces are joined by 7/8 inch thick solid wood of whatever. We could have picked walnut or mahogany or cherry, or I forget what the other wood was. I picked walnut. I like walnut. And they're joined. The middle piece is just solid walnut, again, for me. And I think that I just have 2 pieces. And so they're glued up. And then they're glued to these corner pieces when they are shaped. But there's a spline, just an 1/8 inch spline in between the corners and the middle section that goes all the way through. Okay, so it's 1/8 inch is a saw kerf, and then you get a little piece of wood that's 1/8 inch thick and fits in there. So that's how it's kind of put together. A little more close up of one of the feet, and you can see how it angles forward, front and back. What you can't see is that it comes out at you as well then. A little better view on the side where you can now see that bowing. Now, you have to bow the drawer front, and then ultimately we're going to bow the blades in there to match the fronts of the drawers so they all end up being in one piece. These blades are put in their mortises and stick forward to allow them to ultimately be cut down to having that same shape, the same bow shape. So they are sticking forward out of the frame, where the rear ones you'll see in a minute are sticking inwards because there's no reason for them to go back. They should come in, so they're going to be helping to support the back of the drawer when it's put in place. There's a picture of the back, and you can see the blade in the back goes forward, so when a drawer is in place, it's going to sit, the back of it will sit on that blade. You also notice that these 2 blades, front and back, are going to be connected, not part of the structurally important, but just to be a surface for the drawer to slide on. Therefore, they're called runners on each side. Notice that they don't really fit tightly that way. And the reason for that is there is a mortise in the blade and a tenon on the end of those runners, but the cheek of that tenon is such that it leaves an extra maybe 1/4 inch total, 1/8 inch on each side. The whole purpose of that, a lot of you have maybe been taught and know that wood is going to flex. It's going to expand and contract depending on the humidity and temperature and so on. It almost always does that in this horizontal direction. Very minimal, that it's negligible to worry about it's expanding and contracting up and down. So you got to do something. The bigger the piece, the more you got to take into consideration it's going to do that, and you don't want your joints to break and so on. So that's why this tenon fits inside a mortise, but it's a sliding fit. It's snug, but it can go back and forth. Therefore, it can go back and forth and allow that expansion and contraction of the sides in. There's a more close-up from the front looking towards the back, where you can again see these side runners. and you can't really appreciate here the fact that they're not a tight fit there. They can actually go back and forth. Okay, here's one of those corner pieces that we talked about, which initially is a square. There's some distortion in the picture there, but trust me, it really is a square to begin with. And you're only going to end up using whatever, that 1.1 or something like that for the size of this corner piece. And the rest of this is waste. That's all going to be cut away. That's the only way for you to have that the French feet end up being part of those corner pieces. Extremely important from this point on that you mark everything. You mark, because believe me, even though you carefully make everything and you fit it and it fits perfectly with a lot of work, it may not fit in the next mortise. So you got to have the blade, bottom blade is always going to go in the bottom mortise and so on all the way up. So this, from the beginning, marks this corner piece is the right rear. You can do it any way you want to of marking it, but it's extremely important that you know where that piece ends up going. It's really easy to get confused and then make your cut on the wrong side, and that was, of course, would be disastrous. This also shows that spline, which is just like a simple saw curve on that side, because this is going to be facing inward, right? Where that's going to be facing this. These are back pieces, and so this is going to have the middle, the side section in there, hooked together with the spline like we talked about. A better picture, and chalk is a good thing to mark with. I know it rubs off, but that's kind of the idea. It's a lot easier than even a pencil mark, as you might have to do more scraping or sanding to get that off. So that's just a chalk line. And that's also a back piece. So it's just sitting there kind of by itself, and these mortises and tenons have been done, and there's a lot of dry fitting that goes on. You get something done and you kind of put it together. Gluing is a long way down the line here to make sure everything fits properly. These are the better dimensions. So you can see there's going to be a top that eventually goes on there, just sits on the top of the structure to begin with. There's a 3/4 overhang of this top all the way around. The blades are 7/8 of an inch thick, and I guess it doesn't show here. I forget what the actual top and bottom, but ultimately, including the top, it's about 3 feet tall. The drawer openings for the drawers made by blade, and the space in between is the height of a drawer. And you can see the top one's only 4 3/4 inches, 6 1/8, 7 3/8, and 8. So they are getting larger as you go down and heavier. And the inside diameter of this opening is 41 1/4 inches. The outside diameter is 43 1/2 inches. So what's that come out to? What's the difference? 2 1/4. Yeah, there's a 2 1/4. Is therefore, but that's times 2, or that's double. So it's really only 1 1/8 of an inch. The actual corner pieces that end up being a square only about 1 1/8 of an inch. Therefore, the feet are also that dainty, if you want to use that term then. The side panels are about 18 1/4 inches by 33 3/4 inches. Okay, I will not tell you that we hand chopped the mortises. So we were not period specific in doing that. There is a hollow chisel mortiser at the shop. So if you haven't seen it or don't know where it is or how it works, you have all seen at least a drill press. So you know that a drill press has the bit facing down, and you pull the lever down, and it's going to come into your wood perfectly perpendicular to the wood if the wood is sitting on a flat surface, this way and that way. It's great to be doing holes that are going to reproducibly be straight perpendicular instead of a hand drill that you're trying to eyeball that it's going to be straight. So I love the drill press. A hollow chisel mortiser is like a drill press, except surrounding the round bit that's in the middle, it has a housing that's square that's very sharp on the bottom end. Okay, it's like a chisel, built-in chisel, surrounding the middle drill bit thing. So the round is going to be hogged out, the biggest part of it. Then those square outsides, very sharp, slide down with most of the work already being done, and make that round hole into a square hole. Is that fair? Kind of understand that? I don't know how little the littlest one is, but I have a bench or a floor model also. I think mine goes from 1/8 of an inch to a whole inch. I could make a whole inch square hole. There are 2 wheels on the front of this thing that can make this whole setup go right to left or front to back. The front to back one, when you're not, it's already set up here, so maybe somebody's already started to pull it down. But before you do that, you want to make sure that the mortise is located exactly where you want it. So let's say it's going to end up being in the very middle of this board. This happens to be a blade, and this is the inside of the blade that's going to be facing each other, and therefore that's where that runner is going to go. The runner will be in this mortise that's being made there. You identify the front and back of the mortise, and so you adjust everything so that not only is it in the middle, it's in the very middle, not only at the front of the mortise that you're making, but also in the back. So you can use the other thing to go back and forth this way, and you can make sure that it hits exactly where you want it both times before you make the first cut. Then you set the depth, and just like with a drill press, you pull it down, and it makes that square hole, but it makes it exactly how deep that you want it then. And then you gradually work up to the other end of your mortise and so on, and it's going to be perfectly square the whole time. Now it's a rectangle. The mortise is now a rectangle. You could do the same thing with a drill press, just with a round hole, and just make a series of round holes close enough together, and then you have to get out your hand chisel and square up the edges. So this makes it a lot easier. Now the other mortises are going to be in those corner pieces, and this is a tenon that's going to fit into that other mortise then, though. So these are the 4 corner pieces that have had those mortises made in them. Okay, so this is going to be the bottom, and this is going to be the top. So there's a mortise for a blade, 2, 3. Now the bottom piece is not called a blade, it's an apron. So remember, it's thicker. It's about 2 1/4 inches thick. The master, the teacher, forgot that there's no apron on the back. So he just had us go ahead and make those same arrangements on all 4 corners, but the back corners end up having a space between a blade and the and the bottom of the mortise that we made too big. So I'm blaming that on Alf. So. And we didn't know what we were doing to begin with, so we didn't picture it, and so we couldn't point it out to him until it was already kind of done then. I don't know if you can see, but hopefully concentrate on this chalk line. And as it comes down here, it comes forward, and the back of it. So that's the foot. Can you see that from back there? So that's scrap. That's ultimately going to be taken off with a bandsaw. And then you're going to do the same thing on the back of it so that you're down to that 1 1/8 inches and so on. Does that kind of make sense then? So there are several things about this project that I was scared. One of them was sawing off that, because if you got, one is turned wrong way, that's a lot of lumber and so on. I didn't have any extra of that big lumber and so on. So you're one mistake and I don't know, you're screwed. So I was scared, but I was so happy when each of these 3 steps that I'll tell you the other 2, when they were completed and completed satisfactorily. I don't know why they're kind of set up in this line, but these middle 2 pieces, if either, let's say they're laying like this with the mortises on the bottom of that and the top of that, but if you fold them together, you can see that those mortises should match perfectly on each side. If they don't, your opening for the door isn't going to be square. So they got to be, so rather than, you carefully line up the place for these mortises on one board. You're happy. It is perfect, exactly how you want it. Instead of doing that same thing repeated 4 times, that's kind of silly. When you can line the 4 boards up, we'll clamp them together so they can't move, and draw, you know, a line all the way across, it's going to be perfect on all 4. If you did it one at a time, I don't think they would all be the same. They wouldn't be exactly the same. So this is a way of making them exactly the same. So any questions about so far? Okay, I don't really have a picture of us doing that scary bandsawing out, but you kind of get the idea then. So here is a piece of my walnut that was one of the offcuts of doing that cut with the bottom ending up. This is not a corner piece. This is what was cut off then, but you can kind of see how we made that cut. So somebody pass it around. It is. This is Doug Dale. He's an incredibly important person at Mark Adams School of Woodworking. He's kind of our Dan Coleman and Wayne Watson. He is an absolute expert at anything mechanical. He knows every tool in that shop, and he is responsible for keeping everything sharp and keeping it all adjusted. And you know our shop. He's probably got 12 or more. There's several buildings even there and so on. And all the drill presses and all the bandsaws and all the everything. He's got all those tools, and he has to keep them running properly and so on. He also teaches. He's an incredible person. He lives in Ohio. The class, Mark Adams, is about 20 miles south of Indianapolis. He commutes every day from western Ohio, which is about an hour and a half one way. Every day he drives in, and then same hour and a half to go back and everything. So what he's doing here is just setting up, I don't know why this keeps coming out, cutting the spline, cutting that saw curve. That's all he's going to be doing here. The good thing about having somebody set this up to begin with, not that you couldn't do it, and certainly it's not rocket science, but it's certainly nice to have it already done, so everybody's going to come and do it one back to back, so that one person is not going to screw up and have his be on the wrong side or whatever, and then his thing is destroyed though. So that's what he's doing. Picture, and I forgot. What am I doing wrong? I'm going, but fire on my neck. Instead of being put into a mortise, just are dovetailed to the top of this frame. The nice thing, there are two nice things about that.
Here, I'll take this, and you can have that. Put that somewhere on there. I think what you're doing is you're turning it.
Yeah, sorry. You hear me? Yep. Two nice things about that. Number one, it's going to absolutely solidly hold these two sides together, rather than mortise and tenon, which the glue could get loose or whatever, and it could pull apart. The dovetail is not going to allow that. Plus, the glue up, as you can imagine, when all this is ready to glue up, is kind of complicated. Guarantee you shouldn't try it by yourself. So not only is it really complicated and you have several people maybe helping to do the glue up, You don't have to do the top one. You can do the other glue up, and then that can be set in after the rest of them are done. Because it's set in top, it doesn't have to be put in between the mortise and tenons and so on as part of the glue up to begin with then. Another just picture of, this is, again, everything's dry fit up to this point and so on. There's the front, and there's one of those dovetails, the one that's towards the front. There's the one that's on the back. Part of dry fitting is to lay one of the sides in place on the floor. Now remember, those feet are going to be projecting towards the floor. So it's better to have something moldable like that, or have a piece of wood underneath it so that that isn't going to have pressure on it. You picturing what I'm talking about? So you don't want to have it, and that was even carrying it in the car. Another worry of mine of having to be able to have it not be sitting right on one of the feet then. So if you get everything dry fitted on the bottom, then you can take the top side and sit it on top, again having help of having people put one of the tenons in each of the mortises and so on to help put it together. A little more close up where you can see the insides have that mortise to accept the side drawer runners. I didn't bring in my shoulder plane, but that's what this is called, a shoulder plane. Hope you've been taught that if you're going to make a mortise and tenon, you make the mortise first, even if you do it by hand. Because if you make the mortise first, especially if you're going to use a hollow chisel mortiser, it's going to be perfect. And so you don't want to make the tenon first and then have to try to make the mortise to fit the tenon. It's better to make the mortise first and make the tenon to fit the mortise. Now, so when you're doing this, you make the tenon just a smidgen bigger than the mortise, so that you can work up to that final dimension by using something like this. A shoulder plane has a couple differences. One is the blade goes all the way from one side to the other, rather than stopping. The mouth of the normal plane stops before that, which allows you to lay it on its side like this, which is completely perpendicular to the bottom, on top or bottom. And so there's a 90-degree angle there, and it goes all the way to the bottom, or all the way to the top, and so on. So back and forth, and you can kind of work up on that final dimension, test fitting until you're happy with it. But they may not all be the same again. So it's, again, important to number the ones that you've done. So this is actually the process of doing that front dovetail. Lay it on there, make your mark like you have before, and however you do it, chopping out the space for this. It would be a half-blind dovetail, I guess, and then putting your tail in place, and ultimately, after the other glue up is done, putting that from the top and gluing it together then. These are the side runners, and to begin with, they're just rectangles, but we're going to need to make tenons on each end. This is a setup to do that. You've already made the cheeks with a cut on the ends. Then the distance from here to here, the inside of those cheeks, is going to be less than the actual distance between the two blades to allow it to go back and forth. All right? So this is set up now to make the two side cuts for the tenon. So you set the table saw. It's going to cut the outside of the tenon all the way across like that. It has a clamp that clamps it to the board in the back, and this is a waste piece. So when the saw blade goes into it, it doesn't go into your jig and so on, and kind of mar up your jig. So as you push that whole extension forward, you're going to see the blade is going to come through there and cut the outside of the tenon. So then you flip it this way and do the other outside. Then you flip it this way, and now the back is the front, and do the same thing on the back side. And hopefully you have tenons. They're just a little bit tight on the mortise, and then make them to fit then. And that's what they look like when they're done. Now we get to the fun part. Now this picture has to be distorted, and it's probably me doing the PowerPoint and pulling the wrong dot then or something, because this piece is 3 inches thick. It looks more like a 2x4, doesn't it, to me? Because this is 1 inch and 1/8. It doesn't look like 1 inch and 1/8. So just trust me, this is a much bulkier piece and so on. But you can already, now that you have dry fitted and you have the exact dimensions of the width and height of a drawer that's going to fit in there, right? So you can cut this big rectangle blob of wood so that the outside dimensions are just short of that distance, so that you can shove them in to that opening. You don't want to try to get it perfect, because ultimately you're going to make a reveal that hopefully is going to be the same on both sides and on the top. Let's say a 32nd to a 16th of an inch or something. 32nd if you're really good, but you don't want to do that now. You want it to just barely be able to get in there. But you want it to get in there. But we got to make the bow on the front. Okay, so there's a pattern that you can lay on there. And the reason I don't have one of those, I'm going to show you a kind of a bow front here, but it was really cutting the apron, not one of the drawer fronts, because this isn't as wide even as the top drawer. But you'll see. In fact, why don't you can go ahead and let's pass that around. So this is not one of the drawer fronts. This is the apron, which is cut in the same manner. In fact, here's the other one, which is cutting one of the blades that isn't an apron. It's the outtake. That's the cutoff pieces and so on. You see how big they are, and that's the approximate angle. So again, it's going to end up being 3 inches or 2 5/16, whatever the biggest you can get. Now I don't have a cutoff for one of the actual drawer fronts, because we got so close to the front that it ended up being 2 pieces. The cutoff was 2 pieces because you're picturing that then. But you get the idea with the bigger cutoff there, except that isn't big enough even for the top drawer front. So that was the apron being cut out, and the other is one of the blades being cut to match then. Okay, well, a bandsaw is not going to cut a perfectly smooth line around there, so we're going to have to do some work on it. So here we go. So we want to make the outside diameter, and the bottoms of them should all be already matched. Okay, so if you set all the bottoms, and it doesn't really matter which the little one on top and big one on the bottom, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But you want to set them side by side like that on a flat surface like a tabletop of the bench. Clamp those together, making sure that the bottoms indeed are all touching. So the bottoms you got taken care of. They're all going to be the same height then. What we're going to have to do is to make all these tops, which were individually bandsawed, to end up being identical, the tops, because they're not going to be identical to begin with. So this is done by using a hand plane. This looks to me like more of a number 4, like a smoothing plane. I used a number 62 plane, which is bigger to me. It's bevel up instead of bevel down. It's to me, it works a whole lot. I have a lot more luck with this in every form of planing. So this is my go-to plane for a lot of things. But this is what I used instead of the one that's being used up there. So you can take the sock with it, but you can pass that around. The blade is sticking out, so be careful. There is another plane that's actually made for doing this kind of a thing. It's called a compass plane. It's an old Stanley compass plane. So this bottom can be adjusted to a curvature, either concave or convex, by pushing this knob. So I'll pass that around. Isn't easy. So even Al Sharp said he doesn't use this himself either, but I happen to have one, an old one, an antique and so on. So you can see that would be another way of going only with the grain across the top like that. So this is called a compass plane. So doing this, just doing this, getting the tops all level and not level, but bowed equally and symmetrically and so on, I'm pretty sure it took 6 hours, 3/4 of one day to end up having them look more like that. We end up using a scraping plane, or end card. You could use card scrapers. And finally, we were allowed to use sandpaper a little bit at the end. But you're picturing the whole idea now. Now we have 4 drawer fronts that are the same except their heights. Different heights are to fit in the different spaces in. So now, if we're going to dry front or dry fit again, we can use those to begin with. Now we have to make the blades that same bow. Okay, so if you set one of the drawers, so let's say this is the top drawer, and we're sitting it in where the very end of that curvature, which is about 1 1/8 from the back of the actual board, is even with the front of one of those corner pieces. You see it kind of matches right there? Same on the other side. Now, if you want to make sure that it's more likely to not move when you're marking, you can go ahead and clamp the top blade to the bottom blade just to make it even a tighter fit and so on. So then it's simple. You put a pencil up against the bottom of that top blade and just go you're making your mark all the way. And you take another pencil and you mark the top of the bottom blade and so on. Each one you put in and so on. So now all the blades are marked to be able to bow them exactly the same as the drawer fronts. You with me? So now you have bowed blades in addition to all the other parts of the frame, and it makes them kind of easier to kind of dry fit where you put that all kind of together. So now you have a rectangle that you can kind of set in place. But remember, the runners, you can see they don't really, it doesn't hit, it's not tight, so it can go back and forth. So you have to kind of adjust that as you're putting it in. So this is ultimately, I think this is there were only 5 of us in this class. One of them actually was taking the class for a second time. And I swear, when we got done, the dresser was nowhere done, but I think we were still ahead of him after him having spent 2 weeks to that point. This guy, I called him he was a go fast guy, which I'm not a go fast guy. I like to think and so on. In fact, I didn't do any of my dovetails until I got home. I just like the peace and quiet and my ability for me to think and so on to make sure things are going well. So I'll explain that in a second, though. So I think this is his actual dry fitting for the final actually gluing up and so on. Again, not a one-man job, so you really need help to kind of put this together. Now, notice that everything except the outside of the dresser that you see is a secondary wood. We talked about secondary woods. Now, the only thing that I had was 4/4, 5/4 lumber, so I was able to make all of this out of walnut. I could use some of my own walnut and so on. This is not my dresser ultimately. That's somebody else's who ended up taking a lot of pictures in. After it's glued up and everything is made sure that it's square, make sure that the last dry fit should have made sure that the openings for the drawers are 90 degrees and the two blades parallel to each other and so on, right? Or nothing else is going to work if that's not true. After it's actually glued up, then we went ahead and made a little biscuit down from the top on the inside of those side pieces. And that's going to accept hardware to put the top in place to allow movement. It's called tabletop fasteners. Pass that around. So basically, it's so you can see me. This is the top of it, down and that way. Now the bottom part of that doesn't have a hole in it. It's just going to go in the biscuit there so that it can move back and forth to allow that expansion and contraction. The top has got a hole. It's going to be screwed into the top of the tabletop. So when it's in place, it's still pulled down solidly onto the rest of the dresser, but it still allows that expansion and contraction. So that's what those biscuit pieces are. So this is a piece that's pretty well glued up and so on. And there's front where all the drawer fronts, they're not made into drawers yet. They're just the drawer fronts are kind of set in place, so you're getting an idea. And this is not mine, not my piece, but you'll see my piece here in a minute then. Now, at that point, another thing you can do is to make a rectangle indentation. This is a drawer front, but it's the back of the drawer. So the bow part is on the other side. This is the flat back of a drawer front. This is the bottom. So I'll explain what we're doing this for in a minute, but we're going to make this is going to be cut out on the back bottom of each drawer front, but it's the back of the drawer front. Just keep that in mind, what we're doing. And it was done by a router with a jig and so on, with the center marked on that and the center marked on that. So they're all going to end up being in the very center of these drawer fronts, but the back side of it then. Okay, that ambitious gunner that I showed you, that was one of the members. He decided to volunteer to have Alf demonstrate the making of one of the drawers and putting it together with dovetails and so on. So he ended up scrambling ahead. So this is Alf demonstrating the making of the dovetails for a drawer. So I'm not going to go into details and so on of doing that, because all of you, if you either already know or you're in the fundamentals class and so on, there are multiple ways of making the tails, about how you saw them out and so on. This is obviously not a drawer front, because the drawer front would end like about there. He just threw a piece of wood up there and so on to demonstrate making the dovetails. So he made. Now I didn't have a picture of this when I went home, and I forgot, or I lost my piece of paper. Him telling me how many tails or how many dovetails are in each of those 4 drawers, because each one is bigger, right? I remembered each one was a whole inch or a whole one number up from the bottom, but so it was really 3, 4, 5, and 6. Mine are 4, 5, 6, and 7. But when you see mine, I think you'll say it works just fine then. So there are these pins now. This is a half-blind dovetail, so you've made openings for them for the pins, and you've been able to put the tails into the pins and so on. There is what did I say? The drawer bottoms are 3/8 of an inch. So a 3/8 of an inch dado is put into the drawer front backs and the side and back pieces of the drawers facing in, so that the drawer bottoms are going to fit into that dado. Okay? So this is one kind of being at this point, it's just dry fitted though. Now, I don't understand, I don't remember why he said he wanted the backs to be like this, which would be a through dovetail, but with the tail sticking out the back. I don't understand that. I didn't like that either. I didn't see any reason for that, because by making this, by making the side pieces a little bit longer and having the back end up being back to the back. In fact, I even made them half blind and had a 1/16 of an inch still left over on the back of my back piece. And I'll show you what it looks like at the end. So mine looks a lot cleaner than that when the drawers are put in place and so on. So anyway, I don't remember why he said that he did them this way though.
Jay,
Yes.
go back to, did they leave the dovetails
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, you could make it through, but still have it even with the back of the thing. Then you could have seen it, I guess, from the back. Nobody's ever going to see the back anyway, because this is, you know, put in place behind the thing. No, that's what we did. That's how he did them, and so on.
Jay, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Did you go ahead and radius cut before you cut the mortise?
Say that again?
Did you do your radius cut before you mortised for your dovetail, for your half-blind dovetails? Because you took off so much material in your 7-hour planing.
Right.
That because it seems like while that board is square, it would be easier to clamp it and cut those. With the exception of making that radius cut if you had to remove a lot more after the bandsaw.
You understand what he's.
I assume that was the reason.
But we didn't. The bow was already made. When I took mine home, it looked just like that other picture. It was the drawer fronts were already like that, and so on. I hadn't made the dovetails. I did that at my own house. In my vise, where I'm clamping the drawer fronts to be able to make the pins after I've already got the tails made and so on, then I had a circular kind of thing that fits into the clamp that allows it to be clamping. It doesn't have to be flat on the back. I could have, though, taken the cutout of what was cut off, and that's a little, glad you mentioned that, because that's a little key. Don't throw away those cutouts, but they could end up coming in handy in a glue-up or in a something else like this, where you'd rather the other side still be square. So, great question, though. Yes, sir.
It occurs to me that maybe the reason he left those dovetails protruding was to act as a stop for the drawer when it
It is
went
not, and I'll explain that in a minute. The stops on these are in the front instead of the back. But that would be true, because one way of making stops, if you're using the back, literally that back piece to be the stop, then you could make them too long, actually, and then you can whittle away at it. Exactly. No, that's why you have that groove in the back of the bottoms that I'll show you in a minute here. No, that's not the reason. Okay, but it could have been. So here's his model now glued up top drawer that he made. Here is that slot that we made. It's exactly what we're talking about. There is a piece of wood that goes into the frame, the front of which fits into this groove and becomes a stop. So the stop is in the front, not in the back, like I'm used to saying. Every drawer I've ever made, the stop is going to be in the back, but here it's in the front. So you do have to make a little notch in the back, which carefully is exactly a mirror image of where that slot is in the front, to allow that piece to be put in place and be perpendicular all the way up and down. That piece is also not so thick that the drawer bottom is not going to hit that piece. It's just a guide. So the advantage of having this, not just for the stop in the front, is that piece that's in there, and I'll show you on mine in a minute, also has other pieces on the side. It's a guide. So when you put that drawer into this opening, it has you be able to push it back in place, because you know old dressers and so on with drawers, they rack. They go like that. This way, that doesn't, it keeps it centered. So I'll show you that, but you kind of get the idea. That's why it was not used for a stop then. So.
Jay, also though, your sides are solid, right? So with
Yes, poplar.
Well, with expansion and contraction of of the case.
The case.
Well, if you put your stops on the front, then your drawers will always be where you want them, regardless of what you're flying.
Great idea. I hadn't thought of that, but that's another advantage. But to me, the biggest advantage was it allows you to put that piece, which is a guide for the whole drawer, to go in straight and not have any tendency to go that way. So
I think it's playing double duty here.
Yeah. Great idea, though. Okay, so here is mine. I'm home now, and this is a lot farther into it, but I've already made all 4 of my drawers, and look at the backs. That's solid wood. There isn't any dovetail sticking out the back like that. And I even gained a half inch of drawer space inside, no big deal, but I just think it's a lot prettier, even though nobody's ever going to see the back like that. But now you can see the back of that piece that's mounted to the frame that ends up being mounted to the frame in the front too, which is a stop in the front. In the back, it just has to go all the way out, so it becomes a guide for the drawer all the way front to back. So this is my piece. That's my back. Okay, so the frame could be made out of that secondary wood again, but I happen to have it all, I had my own walnut that I could use, so I made the frame out of walnut still, and I'm going to end up staining the Baltic birch in the center so that it doesn't stand out, although it's in the back, so you aren't really going to see it. This is a cut off piece of the frame for the panel, for the back. So it's going to be mortise and tenon, and you can see how it works either way. This fits half-inch Baltic birch, but this tenon fits it also into that same half-inch so that the ends can be butt jointed. So instead of a miter joint on the end, you can do a butt joint, but it's mortise and tenon all the way around. This is as I'm actually making the individual drawers. This is my piece again. I don't know why it has this extra smudgy line or whatever. Doesn't look like that to me, or the pictures to me in the past, but anyway. So as I made one, this is a perfect time to do my final fitting. I get it all glued up and so on, but now I am paying attention to, I want whatever I've decided the reveal is, all across the top and across the two sides, and by planing, hand planing and so on, or let's say the top blade isn't straight. Thought it was, but let's say it's a little lower in the middle. I can hand plane, just the middle of it and so on. You can't do that with putting it through the regular saw, but you can do that. So, and ultimately, obviously, I'm trying to make sure now that that drawer does indeed fit and go all the way to the back, and I can adjust this as well to make sure that it stops exactly where I want it to, and that it's centered and so on to have the drawer go in straight. So the one side is touching, but the other side isn't. I can adjust that center piece and so on. That's when I had two done. I think I sent you a picture, Dan, when I got to the two done. And there's all four done. Now, look at the bottom two, especially drawer fronts. Do they look like the top two? I love air-dried lumber, especially walnut. It is beautiful. When you kiln dry walnut, it makes it bleached. It makes it a lot lighter than it was to begin with, and it's just not as pretty to me. And it's not even reproducible. They steam it to try to decrease that and so on, and that's going to be a little problem in my finishing then too. But so even these two were probably a different board than those two, and they were even more bleached and so on. It wasn't the same board probably, but that's kiln dried lumber, where mine is air dried, and so what I was able to use and so on, which is not much, it's different, and that provides a finishing issue. The top is put in place. It's a rectangle to begin with. One of my buddies that was beside me, who's a CNC guy, when he got home, made this circle, plexiglass, I guess, or acrylic of some kind, that's exactly 3/4 of an inch from the outside to the inside of the little circle in the middle. Remember, I got to have a 3-inch overhang all the way around. So I could take a pencil, put it in, and push it up against the top edge of the circle. This is against my piece that I'm centering off of, and go all the way around, so it slides along like that. You keep your pencil on the top. You make a mark 3/4 of an inch away from all the way around, even when it's bowed, and even when it comes out on the side and so on. So I thought that was pretty ingenious. So I've already done that, and I've cut out the top. There's my top. I got my problem again. So this is my top. It has been screwed into place and so on, but I still have the problem with the sapwood and the there, and so on to deal with, and I don't like it, so I'm going to try to get rid of it ultimately. Now I'm getting ready to pretty up the dresser, so I'm going to do line inlay, kind of like that first picture, rectangular around each drawer front, about 1 inch in from the sides. I got some new holly inlay. There was a place called Domex, and it was really wonderful to deal with the owner when I'm calling. And he personally went out and checked and found the best peak of holly product that he had micrometered the thickness of it and guaranteed that it was 0.031 or 0.030 or whatever, about a 32nd of an inch. It's already that thick. I didn't have to worry about the thickness of it, which ultimately is going to fit in a 1/32 of an inch 030 sawed trench. It's going to sit right in there. The trench is about 1/8 of an inch deep. When I slice off the pieces of the holly, you make the 1 inch square, and then you can slice off pieces about 3/32 of an inch wide. So it's going to stick out the top a little bit when I lay it in place, which is good because you do not want it to be below the level of the surface, the final surface, because you can't really fix that. But you can chisel it down and make it come down to the level. I also wanted 1 piece across the top and 1 piece across the bottom, which means I had to have pieces of holly that were at least 4 feet long. So that's why I had to go out and get some more of them anyway. That's you see me, I've already kind of cut pieces out that are going to end up doing that. So here's my piece. That just seems more distorted than, so I'm not sure. Does that look like it's hyphens from out there? Stitches. Well, it doesn't look like that really, and I don't know. It didn't look like that on my when I did the PowerPoint that I can think of. So there's that line. Oops. There's a line inlay, which is all solid. That's why it had to be 48 inches, and then the one on each side, again about 1 inch in. I made my other inlays out of maple burl, so a little figured, not as white as holly, but still a lot lighter than the walnut. And I won't get into details, but I'm not sure I really was pleased. To make that, you have to make it thicker. So instead of just being the veneer, it's really 3-ply. So on the back of it is some giveaway, nothing wood, and you do 1 piece this way and another piece that way, kind of stiffen it up, glue them together. So you can see. So that's maple burl veneer that's thickened up. Here's one of my pieces to make a fan on the end, cut out of that. The way to make the piece here, this is one of the fans. So I consulted Steve Latta. Instead of me, I was going to consult Don and have him see if he could do that on the CNC machine or something, which probably would have worked just great, and they would have all been exactly the same. But he said, you know what, instead of making them all individually, start with a circle. So I cut a circle out that was 2.5 inches diameter of the circle with my Steve Latta string inlay. So it's like a compass with a saw on the end of it instead of a pencil on the end of it. So you're picturing I'm going to cut out a circle, and therefore the the edges from there to there is 1 1/4 inches. The sides of this piece. It's a circle now, okay? All I got to do is quarter it now. So it's kind of like a compass. It's got a hole in the middle. So if I put a straight edge across it, making sure that that little hole is in the middle, is somewhere on that straight edge, I can slice off, and now I got 2 halves. And they match each other. And then I take a square and put it again right at that circle and make a 90-degree top and bottom. What do I got now? I got 4. That one circle will make 4 corners like that. Now he said to go ahead and put string inlay around the circle to begin with, which is what I did. Seemed like I could have also done it the other way then too and put it on just like I would do it to make any kind of circle with string inlay. So I did. So that you see that one that's being passed around, it has a little piece of string inlay on the radius part of the fan there. Okay, so it's also, I made the groove to begin with. I sawed that rectangle thing. So when I'm going to do the side pieces, the corner pieces like that, and I have them all made now, and I have them excavated out so they fit in with the top being even with the top of the piece, I make them just a little bit proud, meaning I actually pull them into that line, the sawed line, just a tiny bit, just a 1/64 of an inch or whatever, so that when they're done and glued in and everything, now I can take my same saw and I'm basically sawing off that 1/64 of an inch or so on, and there, if there was any variance of it being 90 degrees, that's going to end up making it 90 degrees. I don't know if that's fair or not, but if you kind of understood what I was talking about doing. Then I made an elliptical bottom. Alf said if I'm going to do that, he gave me the parameters of the width can be from this to this, and the height can be from this to this, and so on, making sure it fit in there. So I had my 7th grade teacher daughter use a computer and print me out pictures of various ellipses of the various things that fit in those parameters, and I set them up there. They were just made out of paper, and I chose the one that I wanted, and so on. So I think it worked out pretty well. Now, there's no finish on this now, so we're almost done. So what I've done here, I'm setting it off the ground to make sure it's not on the dirty floor there. And the finish is going to be the top to take care of that sapwood and heartwood. Another friend of mine who's a finishing expert suggested, and a whole lot of practice pieces, okay? You don't just say, I hope it's going to work or whatever. So on several practice pieces and so on, I experimented with this. But I used trans-tint cordovan dye. Cordovan, you ever had old shoes, leather shoes that used to be cordovan color, a little reddish tone and so on? It's kind of purplish red. And I painted, again after the practice pieces, I painted the sapwood with the cordovan dye. No place else. Just put it right there. Now, the actual finish is going to be shellac, but it's going to be garnet shellac, which again has that little walnut kind of tone to the shellac then. So the top right now, you can't see the top, but the top has had that dye on the sapwood. It now has a coat of garnet shellac, and now I still have to do a stain, which was Old Masters American walnut. Now, if I had all my walnut was air dried and didn't have any sapwood, this would all be, I wouldn't have done anything except a clear finish. But that wasn't true, so I had to do all these things, which made me mad when I ended up making my line inlay not be as pretty white and so on in the end, but there's no way around it. Even talking to all the experts I could find, nobody was able to tell me how they would do that and keep the holly looking white like it started with and so on. Okay, so I got one layer of the garnet shellac. Now I do American walnut stain. And at this point, it's not a stain, it's called a glaze because I already sealed the finish with one coat of garnet shellac. Okay, it's called a glaze. And wipe it off and everything. I'm already really thrilled now that it looks, that sapwood went away. I'm very pleased. And I probably have 2 coats now of garnet shellac on top of the American walnut stain and so on. I think it's looking pretty good, although you still aren't seeing the top, and you'll appreciate that in the final slides in a second then. You with me? Now I just slide the drawers in place that are not stained, but you can kind of see how they look. The garnet stain and so on did make that, is going to make the inlays have a little orangish color, but if you look at that piece that's being handed around, it's got a little orangish color kind of in it, so it wasn't just the shellac that did that though. But unfortunately I got to do that to the front drawer fronts too. Even here you can see the bottom two are lighter than the top two. So there, it's the first one of it all being put together and so on. These, now you can also see now the fans have taken on that orangey color and so on too. And you can't make this a close-up, can you, Doug? If you could still see, I guess another picture I have, you can see a little bit better. But you can see, just unlike that very first picture I showed you, the one that Alf did, it's not white anymore, because I'm sure he had stained that too. He had to stain that with the cherry. You can still see the line inlay, but it just isn't as white as it was to begin with, which disappointed me. The hardware is period specific. Believe it or not, there is a company that makes hardware called Ball and Ball, and if I called the first time I called to talk to her, guess who answered the phone? Pam, what's your last name? Ball. It's nice to talk to the owner too. So pass this around, and I have a bookmark kind of, you can open it to the page where there are, I think, 48 different designs of Heffelwood poles. 48 to choose from. They're all Heffelwhite. By the way, when we went to the art museum, there was one room that had furniture that was from the 1750 to 1800 period of time, and there was that hardware was exactly like that. I have a picture of it on my phone. So that's Heffelwhite. It's a Heffelwhite period-specific furniture there. You're going to have to help me here because I always get it wrong. Those center things, it's escutcheons. Escutcheon. Yeah, I always get it wrong, but those are period-specific, Heffelwhite design escutcheons, but they're fake. They know I did not put in key. I didn't even drill holes to make them look like there's a keyhole in there, but I think it worked pretty well. Okay, now here's the best picture of you seeing what I mean by that centerpiece that's the guide. Put in place, it's even stained and everything, and notice the front. The front is kind of chamfered both directions, so it only has to hit in the middle of it, which is still a pretty broad area. And the back of it can be adjusted so that when you put the drawer in, you make sure that it's going to be the same on both sides, it's sliding in perfectly. See, it goes all the way from front to back, front of the frame to the back of the frame. That's that top drawer taken out, and now you can see that I've added the sides to allow them to be guided by that piece that's in the frame more perfectly. And again, the thickness of those and the thing that sits in the middle is not so that the drawer bottom will never touch either of those things. It's just a guide to let them slide in. Now you see my dovetails, in the front of them at least. So I have 4, 5, 6, 7 instead of 3, 4, 5, 6. But I think it's still pretty, and it's even more solid, right? An extra dovetail. That's a picture. This gives you a better picture or show you of the color. Now you can see the top. Can you see sapwood? I'm pretty proud of the way that ended up and so on. And you can just kind of see with the drawer open, you can really appreciate the thickness of the bow front in the middle there. And you can see again, I don't know why it still looks like the rivets or something, but you can see the line inlay. It's just blurred. It's just not as crisp and not as white as it should be. That's a better picture of the color, I think. My next door neighbor is a photographer. Now, I didn't have her come over and take pictures, but she had a light laser, like a, Darth Vader thing, but it made a perfect light that she just kind of held it in different places because I was having trouble having a shiny, shiny spot or whatever. This is in my living room and it's not got wonderful lighting and so on. So I think that helped to get rid of that glare and so on that was in some of the places. And then there's that final piece and so on. So not perfect pictures and so on, but again, so look at the daintiness of those feet again.
So how much does this piece weigh that those feet are holding?
I don't know, but Steve Michaela is a member, and he was there with David Grunefeld doing the inlay class and so on. They came in and they were two of the people that, and Dan saw part of it, most of it at least, saw my finished piece. Steve Michaela, I said, with the drawers in place, why don't you pick up one end of the dresser, see if you can lift it. He eventually kind of got it up a little bit, but it is heavy. It is 200 pounds. It is really heavy, though. There's nothing in there that isn't solid walnut except the little pieces of plywood that I showed you then, though. Okay. I think we're done. Oh, serendipitously, just today, I got my newest issue of Woodsmith magazine I get. Guess what one of the featured... Now, it calls this a Danish design or whatever, but it mentions that maybe the original design might have been a couple of 100 years ago or whatever. But if you're interested, because I guarantee you there are no plans for what I just made. If you ask Alf Sharp where his plans are, there are any of that. Exactly, there's no plans. But you got plans here. If you look at this, it's nowhere near as complicated and so on. This is mine, so and it has not period specific because he says Danish design. But throw that around too. That was just a. Oh, and I forgot to tell you that in excavating for those corners or the ellipse, you can do it different ways. Steve Latta just takes a regular chisel to kind of get rid of a lot of it and so on. I take my trim router, 1/8 of an inch bit, set to a depth that is just a little bit less than the depth that I need to have this inlay put in and be even with the front. You with me? Just go around carefully, not clear out to the edge. You can knife the edge and so on to begin with. And then I take a router plane. If you don't know what a router plane is, this is a small version. There's a large one too. It has to touch on both sides, the same as the router itself has to touch on both sides or you're never going to be able to control this bit and so on. It has a blade that goes forward here. I set it to the depth of my final depth, and after I've hogged out the big portion with my router, it's a nice flat bottom now. Put this in there and just go across and get that last little bit, that last little scrape and so on to get the depth exactly the same. So this is called a router bit. And I forgot to show you that another thing that Alf is famous for, he's famous for his favorite plane called a spoke shave. So a lot of the fine tuning of this, for instance, when we cut them out on the bandsaw, that was a bandsaw with a pencil line and everything. So we did a lot of that final shaping and so on with a spoke shave, which you can either pull or push and so on. This is a Lee Nielsen one. So. And the final piece this is one of my practice pieces of making the corner pieces and so on. Oh, this is if you put a die on to begin with, it turns that line inlay pink. So that wasn't going to work. So anyway, that's a corner, one of those corner pieces in place.
Like I said, I know nothing about inlay. I've never done it.
Yeah.
Probably will never do it. But my question is it even possible to take your inlay material and coat it with some sort of sealant before you put it in so it won't take stain when you
Well, remembering, you're only sealing the edge of it, which is only a 32nd of an inch.
Somehow you gotta seal the whole piece of inlay.
Then it wouldn't. Then the glue wouldn't stick.
Plus you gotta shave it down.
Yeah, I got to shave it down. So whatever it sticks out on the top, I got to end up making go away. You can't put the stain on and then smooth it out. You got to do your sanding and scrape.
Well, I'll never do inlay.
I never found anybody who could get rid of that problem for me. Dan,
Will you address your application for your shellac?
the application.
Yeah, how did you do it?
Um,
Spray it, brush it, add it?
you'd have to make your own. If you got a sprayer, you'd have to make your own, because you can go to big box Home Depot and buy Zinsser shellac. You can get it in regular or amber. You cannot get it with garnet. So to do garnet shellac, you have to get garnet flakes and mix them up, 1 pound, 2, whatever. And so you have to have it, then you'd have to you have a spray gun to put it in to spray it on. I brushed it on. It dries really quickly. So with shellac, you're going to talk about that in a couple months maybe. But the trouble, it's good, but that makes it less likely for you to get dust nibs and everything, because it dries. It's alcohol based, so it's going to dry very, very quickly. So I brushed it on. You're careful to always have a wet line, so do it quickly. You know, if you're going to go across a piece like that, don't let one edge dry before you get to the other edge, and it dries pretty quick and so on. So as long as you do that, it levels out just like polyurethane. But I wanted to make mine more period specific, so shellac would be an old finish, and I'm pretty happy with it. So
Yeah.
there's 3 coats of garnet shellac.
Yeah, I was wondering, how did you blend the trans tint when you always had that problem with walnut, the same thing you have, where
Yeah.
you've got that sapwood. How did you blend it so when you put down the trans tint, don't you kind of have like a line
You
there?
know, that
How
didn't
do you
seem
blend it?
It was okay. I did not try to tape off, because the sapwood piece is not going to be perfectly straight edges and everything.
Right, right.
I did it with a little like a glue brush. I just threw it,
Really?
I did that, and I just tried to, I followed the edge.
Okay.
I did that first, and then Phil did the rest of it.
By hand, okay,
So-
so it wasn't some trick with alcohol or some such thing?
No, so
Okay.
it worked. I think it worked fine. So
All right, thank you.
yeah,
How did you get the trans tint to match the other walnut?
Say that again?
How'd you get the trans tint to match the other walnut?
it was all the things put together that made the sapwood end up matching the heartwood. It wasn't just. When I was done with the trans tint, it looked purple. The white now looks purple. So it was a combination of that plus the garnet shellac plus the American walnut stain, which is a glaze now, that ultimately made them match.
Next question. Was there any consideration for cutting out the backs of the drawers so that they weren't 3 inches thick, but a uniform thickness all the way around the curve?
Then you would have had trouble. You would have to do different kind of plan of attack, for instance, to make that groove to fit the drawer bottoms in and so on. No. I mean, the ways, there are 3 ways of making something curved. You can do laminate, you can do steam bending, Steve curve, or you can make the honker out of one solid piece of wood. And the front of it's what's bent. The whole piece isn't, so.
Third and last question.
And I wanted it to be heavy, so
No,
I couldn't lift it.
You got that. The sides and the top have the grain running the same way.
Yes.
Why'd you need to use the tabletop cleats?
Because it still goes front to back. And
But they both go front to back.
I don't think you can say, though, that the top and the front are going to expand or contract exactly the same amount. Maybe theoretically they should, because both of them would be 7/8 of an inch walnut. So theoretically, any expansion or contraction might have, but you know, you still needed to do that, though, because the thing that's helping with the expansion contraction of the frame itself is the fact that those runners are loose. They still let it go like that. So you still have to have something to allow the top to also go like that. Even if it's exactly the same as the sides, it still needs to be able to expand and contract.
I had a little bit of a problem with some inlay before, and the way I solved it is I used actually a piece of paraffin, like a crayon, and I colored in the wood that I did not want to stain, and that seemed to work out pretty good. And then later on, I came by, and I took a chisel and I sanded it off, and it did a pretty decent job. So I'm just wondering if that would have worked.
People thought about that, and there's something waxy or whatever, but I could just not imagine doing that to a 32nd of an inch sliver and have it not also be on the wood, and how do I get it off completely? I was afraid to try something like that.
I just used, like I said, a chisel and just kind of scrape it off, and then I used some sandpaper and real fine sandpaper.
Right.
And it seemed to work pretty well.
I'll get on a practice piece.
Yeah, I can
We'll try it.
understand why you practice with it first.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just saying that worked for me. So.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? Yes?
Why did you do your inlay?
He's going to have the microphone first.
Your drawer dimensions, your depths, you said 4, 5, 6, 7, but they weren't exactly that. Was there like, okay, make one dimension and 10% more, and how'd you come up with your?
You mean, was it the golden?
Yeah, that type of thing. Did he have a rule?
It's what Alf had already worked out.
Yeah.
To be the period, whatever. But I think it looks symmetric. It looks pretty.
Right.
They were on that one slide that had the on the chalkboard.
I didn't know how you came up with those dimensions.
I did not come up with the dimensions.
Al did. Okay.
So I assumed they were proportionate, that they would look good, and they were period specific. So, since he got the Cartouche Award, I think he's.
I'm just curious, Jay, why did you do the inlay at 1/32 of an inch? Was it just more of a challenge? I mean,
You mean the thickness of it?
Yeah, a 1/16 of an inch would have been.
Because
Relatively
Steve
small,
Latta says that string inlay looks too sloppy if it's a 1/16 of an inch.
Oh,
He
okay.
thinks a 32nd of an inch. Now you can get his tool with a saw that is a 1/16 of an inch or somewhere in between. He thinks that properly done string inlay should not be thicker than, or if you're a metric, or the .031. Anyway, that's why. Dan's making some beautiful furniture that's your string inlay is gonna be wider?
It's going to be 32nd.
It will be, okay. Initially, I think he was thinking about it being a 1/16 of an inch and stuff. So. Any other questions? All right. Sorry, it ended up being an hour and 20 minutes. So thank you for your attention. You're very welcome.